Hi, everyone. Welcome to Brand Boutique Elite. Be sure to follow our podcast on Apple or Spotify or your preferred podcast platform. My name is Farhana Cannon, and I'm a social media and brand expert and the founder of iMedia Exposure. Today, we have Coach AK on as our guest. He's an entrepreneur, educator, consultant, strategist, storyteller, and the former top 10 world ranked athlete from the University of Oregon. He has traveled extensively throughout the world, working with students, athletes, coaches, government agencies around the world. So, Coach AK, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be having this conversation in this fun COVID world in my house, as you see all of my fun little plants in the background. So,
yes, you do have a lot of plants in there.
Yeah, it's not mine though. It's my partner's, and she is quite the plant enthusiast. I just use it for my backgrounds.
It's pretty. My mom loves plants, and so growing up, she'd have like a million. She still has a million, but she travels a super ton, and she'd be like, "Can you water them?" And I'm like, "No, I don't want to do this." And then sometimes I'd kill them, and she'd be really upset, and I'm like, "I don't know how to do this."
I told you before you left. Well, I do. I've learned how to take care of them a little bit. I remember one time I told my girlfriend, her name's Yasmin, like we could just get fake plants. And she looked at me as though I was killing her firstborn. So I've never meant that.
Yeah, I mean, well, they have health benefits. It gives you like clean oxygen, and it's like a tranquil vibe. You know, they're good.
Yeah.
You can manage them.
Good. Yeah. So, I mean, just super excited just to be talking and, talk about business, talk about entrepreneurship, talk about my story. Because I think what they heard was a lot of different things that I do. And they were still thinking, okay, so what does he do potentially? I don't know. But
yeah. So tell us, what do you do?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, you can say I'm a consultant. I'm an educator. I've been lucky to have a lot of opportunities throughout my life. It started as a former athlete, all-American athlete, professional athlete, then worked into the nonprofit world and doing sports diplomacy with the US government, to speaking, to starting multiple businesses, to now even consulting for big companies like Google and doing sales training. So at the end of the day, what I always believe I'm doing is adding more tools into my toolbox that allows me to just be versatile in any condition, in any market.
What is sports diplomacy? That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, so in 2016, I started a company called Empowered to Play, and we use sports as a vehicle to promote peace. And what we used, the two countries we did most of our work in was the Philippines and Haiti. And what we wanted to do was build diplomatic relationships between the United States and Haiti, for example, because stuff was going on in like 2016, sports as this for the sports camp, as we worked side by side for 10 days to actually improve relationships while also providing opportunities for 300 local youth in the community.
Cool.
Yeah.
Now, from that, how did you become a speaker? And, I know that you do some trainings for Google and things like that. So from being an athlete and traveling around the world and doing, that kind of diplomacy work, how did you change into, being a speaker and entrepreneur in that aspect?
Well, it's funny because when I think about speaking, sorry, we're in COVID world, so we hear like traffic going by. I live right in the city, so it's all normal. But I find it funny what I do on a daily basis. I get paid to just talk and kind of use my phone and the computer oftentimes. But what I do is, in terms of speaking, is I first got into it like 4 or 5 years ago, maybe actually 6 years ago. And I actually used to be afraid of public speaking.
Me too.
Yeah, I'm dyslexic. It's hard for me to like form a sentence sometimes, as you'll find out very soon. But I remember I was sitting there and I had to do this presentation. I was working at this boarding school called the St. Paul School. It's up in New Hampshire. And I had to give these announcements every single week on the events that were going on. And I remember sitting there and just frustrated because I was reading these prompts word for word, but I'd actually add in the ums and the ahs, sound like I was doing it naturally, even though I was just reading it word for word. But the reason I say that is because I used to be afraid of it. And then the more that I did it, the better that I got. And what ended up happening when I started my first company, Empower to Play, I just had to teach and I had to coach like 300 people in one field at one time. And that's what started to get my public speaking really started built up. And then from there, what ended up happening was I got an opportunity to work for this company called Dear World, where we helped literally craft stories of thousands of people around the world. So every single day I was developing keynote speeches, I was doing one-on-ones, I was doing facilitations, and that just led into one thing and another to another while I created this large speaking portfolio.
I think with anything, practice makes perfect. My uncle says if you have 500 hours of doing a thing, it makes you an expert in that.
Oh, I hate that quote. Well, I'll talk about, keep going. I have a reason why, because that's like the 10,000 hour rule. I am so against that, but continue that. I don't want to cut that off.
Well, I just think it's funny, and I don't think that I've ever tracked anything hourly like that. So it's, it is what it is. But when I first started speaking, or when I first was told I should be a speaker, I was like, absolutely not. I'm not getting up in front of everyone. I'm not dyslexic, but I feel like awkward when everyone's just staring at me. And then I got over it. My coach at the time said to me, well, why do you do what you do? And I said, I love helping businesses grow, and I love helping people achieve their dreams by coming up with creative methods to do so. And he goes, well, you know that you can help more people if you just get up on stage and do it. And I was like, okay, fine, I'll do it. And, throughout the years, I have gotten more comfortable. Obviously, now I'm doing the live and podcasts and things like that. I do tons of virtual events in the current climate, and then tons of speaking events. And that being said, I've traveled around the world, and, 5 years ago, I would be nervous. Now I'm like, okay. And what I tell myself is that somebody's going to, because after time, there's people that will see me speak multiple times, and they'll be like, oh, I used this tip that you gave me, and it grew my business, and I did this. And so I'm like, yay, like I get to actually go and help people. And I tell my clients that too, because I think a ton of people are afraid of speaking in front of people. It's not something that we're like naturally taught to do, I think, in this country.
Well, it's funny because I would say, in terms of speaking, the biggest tip that I can give anyone is it's really getting out of your own head. As speaking is something that we do every single day. Right? I have a conversation with my partner, I have a conversation with my little girl, my daughter. We have conversations every single day. But somehow, when we decide to get on stage, something changes. We feel like we have to be something different than ourselves. And so most of the time we think, well, how do I move my hands? And how do I move my head? And do I walk across this stage? How often are we thinking about how we move our hands and how we're going to tilt our head in everyday conversations? We don't. I usually tell people the hardest person to be in the whole entire world is ourselves. And the larger the audience, the more we tend to be not ourselves. That causes us to actually get in our own head and become this much more robotic version of ourselves. With speaking, one of the most powerful things I can tell people is they believe that the speaking engagement starts when you get onto stage. But it actually starts the moment that it becomes into your psyche. So if you're starting to get on thinking about the speech that you have to do, and you're thinking, well, am I going to mess up? What am I going to say? How am I going to do that? By the time you get on the stage, you've already psyched yourself out. So I tell everybody, your goal is just to get up there and just be yourself. Because, and I know sometimes people say easier said than done. It actually is easier said than done, because the moment you're able to do that, nobody can take that as your X factor of your personality and your own individual style.
Yeah, that's really great advice. people would tell me, oh, crack a joke or say something like that. And I'm not funny. Like, I have like witty comments, but I don't have jokes. Like, I'm not going to be the one that's like throwing out jokes. Like, I'll say something witty, but it won't be like a joke. And so when I first started, I'm like, what can I say that's going to make people feel comfortable? And, what joke can I do? And that wasn't me. And so I would try to put something on to like break the ice, and I was like, this isn't working. And then when I stopped trying to do all of the things and I was just myself, like I walk around a ton, I'll go and like closer to people and ask them a question. I use my hands a lot. And when I just am myself, it's so much easier, and I'm not in my head, because it's like I'm going to go up here and talk like I do every day, all day long, to all of the people, and just do it. And I think too, like for me, the thing to get me outside of my head is knowing that when I go up there, I'm going to be helping somebody else, and it's going to shift something, and they're going to take at least one tip from all of the things that I say. And if they implement that, that's going to grow their business. And so I feel like that helps, rather than it just being about me, because it's really not about me. It's about me being of service to other people.
Yeah, 100%. And at the end of the day, you cannot please everyone. And as a matter of fact, you can actually, by your, pushing to please everybody, people are going to not like you because like, oh, this person's a people pleaser. And so the only thing that I can do, or anyone, is go out there and just give it your all. And whether you felt you did good or bad, it really doesn't matter if you felt like you did your best, because everyone is coming at a different place. One thing I stopped doing for a lot of my speaking engagements is to say, now, here's the 3 things you should take away from today. Because it all depends on where they are in that journey. Somebody may have taken something completely different depending on where they at than where they were than somebody else. So oftentimes what I'll do is, I do this a lot in the virtual world, is like, hey, what I want you to do is I want you to put into the chat one thing that you took away from today's, right? And then everybody will read all the different takeaways from throughout the day. So I just the really way to present is to be yourself. There are some tips, there are some strategies, but if you are not able to get that piece down, then you're just going to become a robot and just be somebody else.
I really love that example that you said, for everyone to write in the chat one thing that they took away.
Mm-hmm.
Because in that very moment, people are listening, and generally when they're doing virtual events, they're like drinking their coffee, checking their texts, maybe their kids asking them a question, all of the things. And when you ask them what was this thing that they took away, they have to stop and listen and think for a second, and then actually physically write it down. So now they're actually going to take away that piece. Like that nugget is going to be ingrained just because they had to stop, think about it, type it out, let the public see it. And so that will be their takeaway. Whereas sometimes people can just leave and, not really be fully present. And then it's hard to do participation on a virtual platform, especially if you can't see the attendees. Because I've been on lots of events like that where there's 200 virtual attendees, but I'm literally looking at a screen just talking to myself.
Oh, yeah.
But when I stop and I have them engage, I'm like, okay, they're alive, they're there, they're paying attention. And then it's kind of more interactive, because I'm sure too, when you're actually physically on stage in front of the humans, you probably ask questions and engage. And
I do the same. One of the things we do within Google, so I'm part of this master faculty team where they brought educators, teachers, and coaches from all around the world to become the best virtual and in-person communicators and trainers. And what often happens when people go in from the in-person, they try to mimic the same things in the virtual environment, and it just is not the same. Now, one thing you have is eye contact is a weird thing, because I might be looking at my camera or I might be looking at my computer, but nobody actually knows what I'm looking at. So in the virtual environment, in addition, in the virtual environment, you have a lot more distractions that can be coming on your screen. So you have to almost be able to also multitask. But what I say is, especially in the in the virtual, is you have to increase engagement. That could be one, asking questions very early on. making sure that you have breakout rooms, making sure that you are using different types of modalities for the communication. So what I'll do, not only in the chat, I'll say, hey, what I want everybody to do is I want everybody to raise their hand, right? And now from, 1 to 10, like how comfortable, or this, my camera's all kind of weird, in reverse, is like from 1 to 10, tell me how comfortable you feel with the content, right? So if somebody says a 5, I know, oh, Fahana, I saw that you put a 5 down. What was it that you would still like to, learn, or something that you're not grasping? Or somebody else might have put a 10, and I would say, okay, so what is that has really helped you learn this material? So I use body polls, I use the chat function, I'll use asking questions in breakout rooms, and I actually believe that the virtual environment can even be a better learning environment than in person.
I think that people, they're focused and they're at home, but there are distractions. I like live because I love, before I go on stage, I'll go and speak to a couple of different people, ask them about what they do, what their goals are, and then when I get up on stage, I have my very specific examples that I'm going to be speaking about, but I'll use examples to back up the lesson with specific examples for each industry. So if somebody tells me that they are a makeup artist, I'll use examples, be like, okay, so if you're a makeup artist, you want to do X to accomplish what I'm teaching right now. And I feel like that's really helpful. Do you have any tips on how to kind of really do that in the virtual space?
Yeah, I mean, in the virtual space, a lot of what I'll do is before the session even starts, I do a lot of research on my participants, not just where they're from, but also like some of their hobbies. So it really makes it feel as though it's very personal. I can use that. Like, well, I just saw that we have some individuals that went to the University of Oregon, for example, right? So I'm using some of the personal experiences that I know of individuals to put that into the room. Another one is that I find really beneficial is I say breakout rooms. Breakout rooms are really, really powerful because they make the room a little bit smaller, and then giving everybody a task. And then when they come out, they can present it into the room. So my goal is having them facilitate and having them speak, and I'm just creating the conversation prompts or the discussion prompts, right? It's a very personal environment. And I think this is extremely important because we're in the YouTube generation. If you're speaking for 30 minutes or 45 minutes or an hour without engagement, people are going to sit there and be like, I can get this on YouTube. Is this something that's already been created already? So it actually causes people to immediately kind of check out. But if you increase in engagement, it always makes it feel like it's a personal experience. So for each of my sessions, I only prepare 60%, and the other 40% happens in real time.
Yeah, I like the engagement, and because I've gone on, seminars or whatever, and the second I feel like it's kind of boring, I'm like, all right, I might have it on in the background, I'm doing the other things, and then if it doesn't pick up, if there's not something to capture my attention, the volume will start going down, and then I'm like, all right, I'm over it. And I think that that's the case for a lot of people. So I love the engagement. You said you do research ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
So when people are registering, what kinds of information, because generally they say if you're doing an event, you don't want to have people fill out too much information because then they won't sign up, or, for anything. If it's like a free thing, they're not going to fill out that. So is it mostly, events that people are paying for, that they are giving more information? So how do you get the information? What's the strategy of getting the information from people so that you don't feel like you're asking too much, that they don't want to follow through and register, but you are getting enough so that you can do the research?
Well, it's funny. All I need is a name and a company or some information. Own research. I'll look on LinkedIn, I'll look on social media channels. I want to know who they are outside of just what they put on a form. And the more that I'm able to do that, it actually helps me know how to even introduce myself, right? When I know the people that are in the room, my goal is always going to be to create connection points. So if I know there's a lot of athletes in the room, what part do you think I'm going to include? My athlete background. If I know that there's a lot of, it's an older group and there's a lot of, maybe parents in the room, I'll bring that pieces out, right? Because at the end of the day, I don't want them to just see AK from, Mobile XA. What I want them to see is like, oh, this is AK, that we went to similar schools. We both live on the same coast. He's a father, a parent just like me. And so all of these connection pieces are happening at the very start. And when you are to build those connection pieces, what actually ends up happening is that resistance goes down and they're actually more apt to want to pay attention and get involved.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely having connection. And then that's true kind of in all aspects. Like if you're posting things on social media, if there is something that resonates with like your target audience, they're going to be like, oh, like, we went to the same school, or we're interested in the same charity, or, I liked that quote too, or I liked that speaker too, like whatever it is, people will feel more comfortable and feel as though like you're a peer when they have these human connection points.
Yeah, 100. And I was actually just facilitated a course on influence with Google. And they were saying that in terms of professional relationships, what allows us to gather or gain the most influence, or the power to influence, we're not talking about manipulation, but like influence, is actually character professionally. In the professional world, it's network and reputation, meaning who you are as a person. That way you're able to build rapport is actually the best way to build out your influence and build out your impact. And a lot of people focus on just things like, it's just what I do, or who I, or like the work that you do. Is like, it's not. In the sales world, in the business world, if you're not able to build relationships, if you're not able to build connections, especially in this overcrowded world, then it's going to be very, very challenging for you to navigate. And that's why I would say also working on your communication skills and being comfortable to communicate naturally is really going to be the number one thing that I believe for everybody is going to help them grow their company, their vision, their brand the most.
Yeah, that's definitely true. So when I'm on panels, one of the questions that people usually ask is, what is a book that you would suggest? And, people see me and they're like, okay, you look fairly young, you do digital marketing. They think that I'm going to come up with something. And then I throw out How to Win Friends and Influence People by Carnegie.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, especially the moderators, because they tend to be like a bit older and male. And they look at me like, oh, okay, that's a good one. I've read that. But it's true. It's even if you're doing everything virtually, it still is about building those relationships, building that rapport. Like a lot of people that I've connected with or I've worked with have, or maybe they've met me at one point, but it's just kind of like our relationship throughout, that they may come to me and say, hey, like, I want to work with you. And it's because of like the connection and the relationship that I like built with those people. And I feel like, there could be 5 people that do the exact same thing. And it is if you have made a connection with somebody and like you're building that relationship and not like being like, hey, buy my product, but actually authentically like connecting and building the relationship is when somebody wants to work with you.
100% agree, especially because it just builds that trust. At the end of the day, what people are really asking when they're buying from you or want to work with you is, do we trust you? Because if I told you this, if I were to give you $100, right, or you're going to give me $100, you're going to give me $100, and I would 100% get a 100% return on your investment by tomorrow, would you give me that $100?
Since I know you, or if I didn't know you?
No, whether or not you know me or not, like 100%, it's going to be without a doubt. If you give me $100, you will get $200 tomorrow.
Sure.
Okay. How much, if you knew 100% it was going to happen, 100%, how much would you give me if you would be 100% chance that you would get the return on your investment in 24 hours? How much would you give me?
I mean, as much as I could. If it was 100% guarantee, I'd call up all the people and be like,
exactly. It's 100% the same. And that's what it is. We're always selling our products. We're always trying to get our stuff out there. But what they're always asking us questions, all the objections are like, do we trust you? Do we believe that what you say you can do, you can actually do? Right? And if you're a startup, obviously it's going to be challenging because, well, we've never heard of you, we don't know you, so what do you need to do instead, right? You might need to get some press, you might need to get some media, you might need to do some relationships. But as you go down, we all have these things that we need to do to build trust with our customers or our clients or our team. And your ability to build that trust is going to be the biggest factor that you have to really closing the deal and really building on that relationship.
So getting press, what are some other ideas of how to build trust? Because there's a lot of people that are startups and they're like, okay, well, how do we do that? How do we have somebody believe us? So yes, I can say whatever. I can, show you that I was featured in the Boston Globe. I was featured in this magazine and this thing. And I spoke at, these 100 events. But what are some other things to build trust?
A lot of it depends on your industry and what you do. As a consultant, if you are selling yourself, right, then the way you need to be trust is going to be different than you need to build a product, but they can work hand in hand, the product and the brand. Now, if it's your own individual, right, as you're a consultant, then you have to provide knowledge. It just can't be you selling your product. It could be through press. It could be making sure that you have an image. So if you can have amazing press, but if I go and look at you and it looks like you're from the 1990s, it's not really going to help me build trust. Another one can be is relationships.
Yeah, I was 7, so I don't think you'd trust me back
then. Another one is actually walking people through the process. Like, what does this actually look like? One of the biggest challenges I see with entrepreneurs when they first start is they have a difficulty communicating their product or what's going to be the tangible offering that they're offering. So if I go to McDonald's and I give them $5, I expect that I will receive like a burger and fries. But sometimes when I'm talking to these entrepreneurs or these businesses when they're first starting out, even actually some bigger companies, is I might understand the product, I might understand the concept, but if I'm going to give you this money, what am I tangibly going to receive in return? And even if it's consulting, it's going to be like, here's a write-up, here's a report. It's going to be these many hours. I just need to, the clearer it is for me to understand what I will receive tangibly, I think I just made that word up, the easier it will be to really close that deal. And I think that's the biggest challenge. The second one is we always ask the question like, okay, well, so what, right? We're not able to build out our benefits of our product. We might talk about the feature, like, oh, I have a nice iPhone case. Like, cool. Like, so what does that mean? Like, what does that do for me as the customer? Well, this shatterproof case will allow you, if you drop your phone on the ground, cost you, $500 to replace it. So by spending literally $30, it's going to save you almost 20 times if you ever, in case you drop your phone, right? They're not always able to communicate the value that they actually bring with their product or their service.
Yeah, that's so true. I think, I started my company 10 years ago and, I've added on services, I've elaborated on different things, gone deeper in, and it's been very helpful for me to clearly state, okay, this is, because I can say digital marketing, that can mean 18 million different things.
Yeah.
So I very specifically say, okay, this is a tangible item. This is what we're gonna do. This is how many hours we're gonna do X. This is what you're gonna get. And then the results part. I think a lot of times, even when you're writing sales copy or writing digital marketing copy, things like that, I ask my clients, so what do they get? What's the result? And people say, oh, they get to work with me for 4 hours a week. And I'm like, okay, that's a thing that they get that thing, but working with you, what does that help them achieve? Like, are they going to get more sales? Are they going to have their sales script written out and practiced and executed perfectly? Are they going to be able to speak on stages? So I think that the results are important because people want to buy the results.
And it's also making sure that one of the 6 major buying motives. Right? There's something that's like, that sounds nice, but what is it, something that I need as a customer that's going to make me put one foot in front of the other and actually purchase or move forward? Right? We have one that is, the feeling of something lost, or the feeling of prestige or value, the one of security, right? Is this going to make me feel safer? So if you're able to attach it to one of the 6 major buying motives, it's actually going to increase the likelihood to make that person more proactively want to work together and make that purchase.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned Mobile XA, and I know that that is an app that you are working on right now. Do you want to share what that is going to be and what that's going to provide to, people and coaches?
Yeah. So Mobile XA, it's a mobile application that we're developing. And actually, it's also going to be a desktop app as well. But it's accountability and business coaching software for early stage entrepreneurs. Now, that actually started during COVID when we're all stuck at home. And we realized that we don't really have anyone to help keep us structured in our day. We were oftentimes kind of procrastinating, had all these things that we needed to navigate through. And so what we did is we created these personalized accountability and business coaches for individuals, where they literally have a coach at the palm of their hand. Now, the whole premise of it is very, very simple. What we do is every morning, people would put in the task or the high impact task they want to get done for that day. And then we have coaches that making sure that they remind them to make sure it gets it done by the end of the day. Our goal is really to create positive habits. And most of the time, we actually aren't moving forward in our lives because we're not creating consistent habits that are going to allow us to actually take the action to create the results that we want.
And when you speak about consistent habits, what are some of the consistent habits that you have to, be productive and whatnot?
Yeah, so for when this first started out, it was like 6 months ago when we were starting. And I can just tell you about some of the results that we've had so far. It was myself and her name is Amy Kochek. She's an author. And I remember we were sitting there before it started, and I was sitting there and I said, hey, if you get this task done or don't get this task done in the next hour, you owe me $20. Now, at that moment when the money came into the picture, it actually activated the reward sensor in our brain that actually made her proactively be more inclined to get it done. So she called him back an hour later. She's like, oh my goodness, I got that done, right? And we kept on doing that. Now, some of the habits that I started, we both started, was for me, I started a podcast and went 120 days straight without fail, right? Every single morning. But what you realize is that when you begin to start a podcast, or I was doing morning meditation and working out every single morning, is oftentimes we always have this thought and this action part of side of us. I'm trying to work on this camera. And when we begin to procrastinate, that thought to action part, but when we start taking action, when we say, okay, when I start to take action, what ends up happening is that thought to action becomes one. So you no longer are over agonizing why you should do things. So by me simply doing a podcast every morning and meditating every morning, I no longer procrastinated on the emails that I needed to send. So when you no longer procrastinate and you're taking more action, what ends up happening? You get more results. More stuff is being produced. More people are seeing what you're doing. You're able to get more things produced. And that's really what the habits actually help you create, is some consistent habits that really just get you out of your own head to begin to take an action.
Okay, so in the app, people can log in and they state their goal for the day, and then there's a coach that basically holds them accountable to getting that done.
Exactly.
And then who are the coaches, and can they work with the coaches more?
Yeah, so within the app, we just went through 2 beta cycles. Now, the first 2 beta cycles, we were actually doing some test groups with some individuals, and we were able to get that feedback from them to actually put into the app. So we're gonna have 3 different levels. The first one is kind of just the free version where you're able to put in your task, and we'll have an AI chat box that will actually help guide people through the day. On some of the premium features, we're gonna have also the AI chat box, but a personalized coach, habit tracking, how to help you plan out your weeks and your days, as well as a bonus structure to make sure you get things done, and also resources. And then on the premium business version, we'll actually give you opportunities to actually meet with your coaches through Zoom to that next level.
Super cool. So are there any last tips that you would like to share with our audience?
Well, yeah, I think overall, at the end of the day, and you were mentioning about the 5,000, the 10,000 hour rule, is I believe that's been one of the biggest fallacies in this world today. We believe you just put in more work, you put in more time, you're going to get better. But we don't realize that everything interconnects. So when we say, we're both a speaker, somebody might also say, well, I'm a teacher. Like, well, a teacher and a speaker and a moderator and a trainer, they're all doing relatively the same things, but it's these labels that we put around ourselves that actually limit us from growing, from learning, from even connecting. So I use this example sometimes of talking about how this all interconnects, is we think that work that we do, for example, let's say you want to be the best piano player in the world. Do you think that typing on your computer helps you become a better piano player? Just a quick question.
No.
Okay. Now, if you were to break down the individual tasks that it takes to be a typist or a piano player, they're relatively the same, right? That's amazing high-end coordination, dexterity within your fingers, to be able to read music or sheet music, or even just type on the screen. So people think that physically just being on the computer all day or being on the piano all day is what's going to get you better, but we're not realizing that everything that we're doing each and every single day is getting. Conversation with you right now is helping me become a better speaker. Me working on even writing a paper is helping me be a better speaker because it's helping me break down how to speak more concisely, for example, right? So for everybody, my last kind of parting words is we often put ourselves into these boxes. And I think within this COVID world, one of the most important things we need to realize is we need to become adaptable. And the more tools that you're building, that you're able to add into your toolbox, actually allows you to not be dependent on any industry, on any market, or any current economic situation. It allows you to actually jump into different buckets when you need to be, because all you're really doing is bringing out that particular tool for that particular task or that opportunity. So I really tell everybody during this time, spend some time learning, trying different things, because you're going to realize how much better it actually gets you in all of the things that you do.
Yeah, I think that utilizing resources, getting coaching, learning things, positioning yourself with the right people, all of that stuff helps with the tool. So you don't have to be, speaking all day for, those hours, but you can actually be with another speaker that's going to critique your speech and help you break it down and be better. So there's definitely ways to get to your goals faster if you ask for help and you find the right people to guide you in that direction. So I think that that's super important. You say to have like different buckets and things like that. And I think it's great to, have a variety of different sources of income and ways to grow and build. But I definitely have seen a lot of people try to pivot into a place that it's like, okay, well, you did this one thing. You could diversify and do something that made sense or was complementary to this one thing. So it would build that one thing, but you're doing something else. Like, for example, during COVID, I started this podcast because I was like, how am I going to connect with people and have my audience get great tips and stay engaged. And so this was another avenue. It wasn't completely something different. It was just another avenue to get me towards my goals. But I've seen a lot of people just try to do something completely different, and it's like, I don't really know why that doesn't really make sense. And I don't know, I wouldn't trust you to do it. Like, because you don't have, that's like right now, if I was like, okay, well, I style photo shoots, but let me start cutting people's hair. You don't want me cutting anyone's hair. It will be all kinds of crooked. So it's like, oh, I'm all of a sudden like a hairdresser now. And it's like, that's not really, I didn't go to school for that. I don't know anything about it. I can barely, I can curl. That's it.
Well, it worked, but we all started there at some point. I just started day trading this year, and that's another significant revenue stream for me. And oftentimes, the reason why we're not good at things isn't because of talent. It's because sometimes we just don't know the proper fundamentals and the frameworks. For example, when I first started speaking in the virtual environment, the first virtual speaking engagement I did, it sucked. But it sucked because I didn't know how to properly engage online. I didn't use the chat. I wasn't using body polls. I was speaking for 20 minutes instead of cutting it down into 7-minute chunks or switching it up. So if we learn the tools and fundamentals, I believe anything in the world is possible. And sometimes you don't actually have to learn everything, because this is where you can build out your team, you can outsource, and you don't have to learn how to do everything. You can still hire people to do things for you that you don't have to do everything yourself to get the results at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely learn things. I like the method of being like, not trying to do something just because you think that it's going to be a way to make money if you're not really good at it. I think that there needs to be some authenticity. I think that you need to have the passion and you need to know the experience. You have to have the experience before you try to sell something that you're going to come short at. So I think that, like, there is the concept of diversifying and learning, but also making sure that you are not trying to sell something that is not going to really benefit somebody because you don't really know what you're doing, kind of thing.
Well, we'll never know how everything interconnects. I was an athlete. I was an All-American athlete in college, but I was also a thespian, an actor. And all the other athletes were making fun of me, like, oh, he's an athlete, thespian guy. And I feel comfortable on a stage. We don't realize the actions that we do tomorrow or today and how it will benefit us down the road. And my friends now in college, we all make fun of it now. It's like, well, now it makes sense why you're doing all that. But if we only think about things in the moment in time and don't realize, hey, just do this for fun. You may not know how it interconnects or how it needs to be, but down the road, you may need this. Even, for example, this podcast that you're doing. There might be 4 years down the road, it's like, hey, have you done a session on this? You can always pull it out of your toolbox for another day. And you never know when you need it.
Yeah, and I've been really focusing on what's going on in the world and finding the right speakers to discuss. So, for example, right before the holidays, I'm going to be, I have somebody that's going to talk about mental health, because what's going on in the world and people not necessarily getting to spend time with their families or maybe feeling a lack of community in general. I feel like that's something important to share with the world. So definitely like adding that. And that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with like my business or brand, but I think that that's like an important thing to, share with people to help people out.
Yeah.
So the thing about what you were saying about the actor, one of my good friends, Michelle Jewsbury, she is an actor or actress, and she's a speaker, and she's really great because she has that stage presence and she feels comfortable, and she created a charity called In Silence Voices that help domestic abuse victims and things like that. So it was something that happened in her life that she created this charity. It was her background from acting and then incorporating that and then being a speaker. It all kind of just really works, and it's just all these random things that she was interested in. And so I can really see like the diversity of that coming together. So I have a fun question. If you could be a superhero, what would your two superpowers be?
Two superpowers.
Yeah, you get two.
Two. And it can't be like a genie type thing.
Oh, it's
Like, be my just.
not
No,
really. Have whatever.
I would say teleportation would be
Okay.
one. I like to travel. I like to get from point A to point B relatively quickly. And I would like teleportation. I always used to say like mind reading, but I don't really want to know what everybody's thinking all the time. As it's changing, I used to say like super strength, but now all I'm lifting is like cereal in the morning. I don't lift that much stuff. But I think the only thing I'm really take is like teleportation. That's it. And also, actually, to remember everything that I've ever learned.
Yeah. That's a good one. My memory is not always super great. I remember a lot of things and I have a lot of information, but like people will be like, oh yeah, last week, remember this guy said, or like that song came on and I'm like, or this happened in the movie. I'm like, nope, don't remember. But like, that would be cool. So mine are to fly. Because in Star Trek, when they teleported, sometimes they didn't come together all right. I want to fly really fast.
But I always imagine, I think about the flying and then I think about like, would it be cold? I don't like being cold. That's why I put teleportation, because I'd rather just like get there relatively quickly.
That's true. I do think about the coldness factor, but then I'm like, maybe if I go fast enough, I won't feel it. And then I'm a superhero, so I don't know. And then my second one is to speak every language in the world.
So you want to be like a diplomat or an ambassador?
When I was younger, I lived in New York City and I lived in Long Island City, and my apartment, the gym, overlooked the UN. And I'd sit there on like the elliptical, be like, okay, I'm going to learn a couple languages and I'm going to work at the UN. And like, I just sit there. It never happens and I don't know languages, but that was something that I was interested in. Like I was thinking about doing an international diplomacy or international affairs master's at some point years ago, but that's not it.
If you want to, but work in it. So I'd be happy to talk.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for being on.
Well, thank you. I much appreciate it to enjoy this conversation in the afternoon in the city. So much appreciated.
Thanks everyone for listening. Bye.